لا عدوان إلا على الظالمين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله أجمعين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, we praise Allah Ta'ala and thank Him for His many blessings. That He has aided us and assisted us in gathering together physically in one place and close together, as is the way of our companions, the way of our Salaf. In a second. Trying to begin without using the microphone for a benefit. And that is so that our brothers realize the microphone system is for the sisters, not so that we can sit so far away and have an appearance of people who don't have any real ambition for knowledge. Although I know the ambition for knowledge is present. I know it is. Right? However, we want to be a people who adorn manners like this. People who adorn manners of the study circles of knowledge. They are those who draw close to their teacher, not only physically, but with mahabba, with love and concern. And from the way of the companions was that when the Prophet ﷺ would speak to them, they would come physically close to him and gather around him closely. So for whoever is able to do that from the men, those of you who are not ill or elderly and thus you need the wall, then I ask you to come close and it will be a better benefit for you. Now, after praising Allah and sending salat and salam, meaning asking Allah to raise the rank of His Messenger Muhammad, we begin this evening, the 13th night. Is that right? The night preceding the 13th or the 12th? I believe it's the 12th, sorry. The night preceding the 12th day of Rabi' al-Awwal, the year 1436 here in the beautiful island of Trinidad in the Caribbean at Masjid Khalifa. We begin with the statement of the author. Who's the author? The author of Al-Usul al-Sitta, what's his name? Ahsantum, Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb. And he died in what year? 1206. And the name of the book is called Al-Usul al-Sitta. The 6 principles. And what is it that these are principles or grounded matters or foundational matters? What are these 6 things exactly? Can anyone summarize them for us? 6 things that are very special. 6 foundational matters. What is it that combines all of them? Anyone remember from the introduction? These are matters which are easy to understand, very clear from the evidences, yet what has happened, the majority of those who ascribe to Islam, even those who are very cultured and very knowledgeable and on a high academic level, they have either turned away from these grounded principles, neglected them, or they're just ignorant of them, subhanallah, with their high levels of academic progress. The first of them was what? The first of these 6 principles that we studied here together on Wednesday night. Ikhlasuddin Lillahi, to make all acts of worship in the religion for Allah alone, and to shun acts of polytheism. And you say, well, that's very obviously the foundational matter of our religion. Yet how many of today's Muslims will tell you it's okay to visit a shrine, it's okay to offer a sacrifice at a grave site, it's okay to call upon a saint if you have the intention to reach Allah, and so on. There are so many people In fact, the majority of those who ascribe to Islam will fall into an error as it relates to the first principle and all of these 6, and that's why the author compiled them, that they are easy and they are easily understood. The evidences are very clear. They're not intricate matters that require a lot of advanced, intellect, but they're very simple matters that every Muslim should be able to understand. And the books of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb are full of matters like this. Basic matters that have been neglected. Basic, simple issues of tawheed and shirk that have been neglected or abandoned by so many people. So the first one was making the deen sincerely for Allah Ta'ala. The second one from last night was what? Who can remind me? The second one from last night. Ahsant. Making or keeping ourselves unified upon the rope of Allah and the obligation to shun splintering or splitting up into groups and divisions, that we are required to come together on one understanding of the religion, the correct understanding, the habal of Allah, the rope of Allah, which is the book, the sunnah, according to the understanding of the Sahaba, and no other deen could be the habal of Allah, the rope of Allah. No other understanding could be that rope which we are required to hold together to all in a united fashion. Now we come to al-asl al-thalith, the third foundational matter of the 6. أن من تمام الاجتماع السمع والطاعة لمن تأمر علينا. And from the completion of the second point, that is, for us to complete our application of the second point and come together properly in a way that Allah has legislated, then we have to hear and we have to obey all of those who have been placed in authority over us from the Muslim authorities. وَلَوْ كَانَ عَبْدًا حَبَشِيًّا, even if he were an Abyssinian slave. Not only from Abyssinia, and our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned this when he encouraged all of us to have obedience, to hear and to obey the Muslim leaders, speaking to Arabs from 1400 and some years ago that still had jahiliyyah of certain tribes being better than other tribes. They still had in them the remnants, some of the remnants of jahiliyyah. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that the effects of jahiliyyah or traits of jahiliyyah shall remain in this ummah from the qadr al-kawni, from the qadr that Allah has decreed that the Muslims shall remain to have within themselves al-fakhr bil-ansab wa ta'an fil-ansab, that they will have braggery and an obsession with lineage, and who's a better lineage than who, and they'll have insults and abuse that they offer to others, meaning that there will remain amongst this ummah, even with all of the iman, all of the tawheed, all of the success that we're given, there shall remain amongst us people who still have these traits of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, while they are not permissible, but yet they are decreed to happen as part of our test. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, addressing some of those people who had jahiliyyah remaining in them, or had these traits possibly remaining in them, and this message would be carried on to many generations later of people who would have these traits of jahiliyyah, that you are to hear and obey, even if, as a person of boastful lineage, would not accept or not like that a darker person or an Abyssinian would be an imam over him. So even if the Abyssinian, and not only Abyssinian, but a slave, not just Abyssinian, but a slave, if that was the imam of the Muslims, then you are still required to hear and to obey. And the Prophet ﷺ gave us many other scenarios for other types of people who would still have some resistance to obeying their leadership. So he told us to hear and to obey. وَإِن ضَرَبَ ظَهْرَكَ وَأَخَذَ مَالَكَ. even if he beats your backs and takes your money. It's found in Sahih Muslim. For those who would say, no, we only listen to our Muslim leadership when they are righteous, as the Shaykh is going to explain in his discussion. Shaykh Muhammad Aman is going to explain today, insha'Allah ta'ala. So he begins his explanation of this point. هذا الأصل من الأصول الستة. This foundational matter from these 6 principles التي ذكر المؤلف مع عظمها ومكانتها غفل عنها وجهلها كثير من الأذكياء وعقلاء بني آدم. These matters that the author has mentioned, while they are so great in their status in the religion, and they hold such a place that is so clearly high and obvious, they are matters that have been neglected, or people remain ignorant of them amongst those who are more educated and more intellectual from the children of Adam. فَغَيْرُهُمْ مِنْ بَابٍ أَوْلَى. So if the intellectuals and the educated ones are ignorant of this matter, then how much more are the actual ignorant people and those of lesser knowledge and understanding? They're even more ignorant of this issue. فَلِذَلِكَ يَنْبَغِي لِطُلَّابِ الْعِلْمِ حِفْظُ هَذِهِ الْأُصُولِ. Thus it is befitting for students of knowledge that they memorize these 6 foundational matters, along with مع الأصول الثلاثة, along with the 3 principles, that other book written by the same author that we recommended to be read before our 2nd class, if you recall. The 3 principles, ثلاثة أصول التي تقدم شرحها فيهتم بها ويفهموها. So he says those books, the 6 principles and the 3 principles, should be memorized, and the 3 principles that have been explained previously, he means in his previous lessons in Al-Madinah, they should be studied and they should be understood. وَهُوَ أَنَّ مِن تَمَامِ الْاجْتِمَاعِ. This principle is that from the perfection of your coming together in unity, لأنه ذكر في الأصل الثاني أمر بالاجتماع في الدين ونهى عن التفرق. Remember that he mentioned in the 2nd foundational matter that we have been ordered to come together in the religion, and we have been forbidden from splitting up. وتقدم الكلام على وجوب الاجتماع في الدين, and the explanation of the obligation of coming together in the religion has preceded already. That was last night. وعدم جواز التفرق, and the mention of the impermissibility of splitting up. وأن التفرق يخالف روح الإسلام الذي جاء به النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, and that splitting up is something that is contradictory to the very spirit of Islam that the Prophet came with. May Allah raise his rank and grant him peace. هنا يقول, in this place, in this 3rd principle, he says, أن من تمام الاجتماع السمع والطاعة. From the perfection or the completion of your coming together in unity is that you hear and obey, meaning the Muslim authorities. إذ لا يحصل الاجتماع ولا تستقيم السلطة. Since there will be no unity and real coming together, and authority will never be established properly over that unity, إلا بالسمع والطاعة, except if the people hear and obey. فلا يستقيم الدين إلا بالسلطة. And the religion cannot be established except with the Muslim authorities. وَلَا تَسْتَقِيمُ السُّلْطَةُ إِلَّا بِالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ. And those Muslim authorities can never be established or can never maintain its place except with hearing and obeying from the everyday people. And you remember yesterday the Shaykh made an example of 2 of the greatest scholars, who if we were to compare them, we might find one of them more academically strong, but the other one was aided by the Muslim authorities. One of them was Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Was he the example of the one aided by the authorities, or the one who wasn't aided by the authorities? He was not aided by the authorities. So the Shaykh made a remarkable distinction that in the lifetime of Ibn Taymiyyah and after his death sometime, his writings, his teachings, his heritage had a small impact on the society. Not a very big one in his lifetime, because he did not have the Muslim rulers getting his back. He did not have the support of the Muslim rulers. In fact, he had the opposite. That the people of innovation and desires, they had the ear of the ruler. And they would speak against Ibn Taymiyyah, and they would get Ibn Taymiyyah exiled and jailed. Right? Who is the example of the one who may not be as academically outstanding as Ibn Taymiyyah, but he resembled him through the revival of Tawheed and the teachings, and he had governmental support, and he had the backing of the Muslim government. Who is that? Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, the author of the Usul al-Sittah that we're reading. And so he's mentioning how, look at, it was only when, in the 12th century, the Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb came, and the teachings of Ibn Taymiyyah were revived, and the teachings of Ahmad ibn Hanbal were revived, and the early books of the Salaf became again having their place in society, so much so that the people of innovation hated him, and they hated that he brought these books back, and they hated that he brought these teachings back, and they hated the revival, because when the haqq comes, it crushes falsehood. It crushes falsehood, it does away with falsehood, it nullifies falsehood. So all of the people and their attachments to innovation became angry with the advent of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb, and we haven't heard the end of it until today. Even until today and beyond. What do we hear about people who teach this kind of material, Tawheed with its evidences, warning from shirk, warning from calling on the deceased? What do they say about those people? Wahhabis. For 200 years or more now, the term Wahhabi has been the knee-jerk reaction of a Sufi or an Ash'ari or any number of heretical innovators and people clinging on to the misguidance of their forefathers to give them an excuse and a feeling of it's okay to remain on what you're on by inventing lies and attributing falsehood to those Wahhabis, meaning Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul-Wahhāb and anyone from the ulama that recognize his status and use his books and rely on the evidences and the arguments of his books, which actually call people back to at-Tawheed. So that helps us remember that having the backing of the Muslim authorities is something which spreads the teachings and something which gives the teachings that support which is needed. And he reminded us yesterday of the Messenger ﷺ himself asking the heads of the tribes for those who would support him, and they would get paradise. And remember, Islam went for a long time with just a handful of followers, until we found the power and the strength of the people like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu joining the ranks of the Muslims. People that gave Islam physical strength and military strength. And when you had in the army the likes of Khalid bin Walid as a strategic coordinator of the armies, look at how the armies would have success and how intelligent and how crafty these great men were who came to Islam with their military strength, with their military strategies and so on. That Islam is aided by two essential matters: ad-dalilu wal-burhan, al-ilmu wal-burhan, knowledge and proofs, was-sayf was-sinan, and by swords and arrows, by military backing. By military backing. So Shaykh Muhammad Aman goes on saying, إِذَنَ السَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ مِنَ الْوَاجِبَاتِ الْأَسَاسِيَّةِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. then if you know all of this, then hearing and obeying, they are matters that are from the most essential obligations in Islam. لِمَنْ تَأَمَّرَ عَلَيْنَا, regarding our interactions with all of those who are in authority over us, meaning the Muslim authorities, وَلَوْ كَانَ عَبْدًا حَبَشِيًّا, even if you were an Ethiopian slave, أي بصرف النذر عن موقع ومكانة هذا الوالي, meaning we give no importance to the social status of this Muslim ruler or his status in terms of his lineage and so on. We don't give that any credibility. What gets the credibility is his position. وَمِنْ أَيِّ جِنْسٍ كَانَ, no matter what kind of person he was. وَمِنْ أَيِّ لَوْنٍ كَانَ, no matter what his complexion or skin color was. عَادِلًا كَانَ أَوْ فَاجِرًا, whether he is upright himself or he is a disobedient Muslim. Very important point. فَلَا يُشْتَرَطُ أَنْ يَكُونَ الْوَالِي الَّذِي تَجِبُ السَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ وَالْوَلَاءُ وَالدَّعْوَةُ لَهُ أَنْ يَكُونَ عَادِلًا. So it is not a condition that the ruler that is required to be heard and obeyed and to have allegiance given to him and to be the subject or the object of people's supplication, that they pray for his success. It's not a condition that he be himself an upright person. بَلْ مَنْ تَوَلَّى أُمُورَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَجَمَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَى يَدِهِ كَلِمَةَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Rather, whoever has undertaken the position of being in charge of the Muslims, and Allah has gathered the people under his control, the Muslims under his control, وَجَبَتْ طَاعَتُهُ وَالسَّمْعُ لَهُ, then it is an obligation that you hear him and obey him. Then the author says in the text, فَبَيَّنَ اللَّهُ هَذَا بَيَانًا شَافِيًا كَافِيًا. Then Allah has clarified that with clarifications which are clear and sufficient. بِوُجُوهِ مِنْ أَنْوَاعِ الْبَيَانِ شَرْعًا وَقَدَرًا, with a number of different approaches or explanations, with legislative rulings and as well explanations of the qadar. So the Shaykh Muhammad Aman says, ذَا بَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ قَدِيمًا وَحَدِيثًا وَبِكُلِّ وَجْهٍ, that it has been spread amongst the Muslims from of old and recently, and with every type of evidence that Allah Ta'ala has clarified this matter. مِنْ أَنْوَاعِ الْبَيَانِ شَرْعًا وَقَدَرًا, from the various types of explanation with legislative discussions and with discussions based on qadar. فَبَيَّنَ ذَلِكَ شَرْعًا, so he clarified it with legislative rulings. بِمَا شَرَعَ اللَّهُ وَجَاءَ بِهِ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, as it relates to what Allah legislated and what the Prophet came with. May Allah raise his rank and grant him peace. وَقَدَرًا, and as it relates to the qadr, فِيمَا قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ, in what Allah has set into place within his creation. وَعَلِمَ وَكَتَبَ عِنْدَهُ وَشَاءَهُ, and those matters which he knew about and he wrote to happen, and then he brought them into existence by wanting them to happen. All of those matters from the qadr. And that is a reference to the things that we can witness when the scholars have the support of the rulers. Then we see the qadr kawni, that what happens in the creation is that the da'wah is successful. And when the scholars have proofs and evidences but no backup from the Muslim authorities, we've seen the examples of Ahmad ibn Hanbal being jailed and humiliated. We've seen the examples of the scholars throughout history being exiled, being humiliated, and many of them being killed or tortured over the correct teachings in Islam. So from the qadr of Allah is that when the scholars unite with the rulers and they are together, and that's one of the secrets behind the whole issue of being with the rulers even when they are disobedient, so long as they are Muslims. Because Allah aids the da'wah sometimes even at the hands of a disobedient person. And what is important is the message of Islam in its purity reaches the people. even if it's through the assistance and the help of people who they themselves disobey certain matters in that religion, yet they support the correct teachings. They back up the correct teachings, even when they themselves are not the best examples. This is essential in the religion of Islam, that we recognize qadaran. The reality is, we need our scholars and we need the Muslim rulers. We need them together and we need to be under them, supporting them, making dua for them and supplicating for them. And that is how Islam has advanced when it advanced in history. And Islam did not grow and expand and advance except with these matters in place. And every time one of these matters was missing, Islam declined. That's the intention here by looking at the qadr, looking at what has taken place historically. وَمَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ شَرْعًا وَدِينًا وَدَعَا إِلَيْهِ وَأَمَرَ بِهِ. And the things that Allah has legislated in the religion and that He orders and calls to, they are things قَدْ لَا يَتَحَقَّقْ. They are things that may not take place. This was discussed in detail last night. إِذْ قَدْ أَمَرَ اللَّهُ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا بِالْإِيمَانِ. As one example, Allah has ordered all of the people to have iman, to have faith. وَلَمْ يُؤْمِنِ الْجَمِيعِ. However, not all of the people have believed. This is the qadr of Allah, al-shar'i, as it relates to His legislative rulings and what He orders and what He loves. وَأَمَرَ الْعِبَادِ جَمِيعًا بِالطَّاعَةِ. And He has ordered all of His servants to be obedient. فَأَطَاعَهُ مَنْ أَطَاعَ. However, those who obeyed are the ones who obeyed. وَخَالَفَ مَنْ خَالَفَ. And those who contradicted that and disobeyed are those who did that. وَلَكِنَّ الْإِرَادَةَ الَّتِي لَا يَتَخَلَّفُ مُرَادُهَا. The qadr or the irada, what Allah wishes to happen, that never ever is resisted or is stopped or delayed, and that is هي الإرادة القدرية الكونية. It is the qadr kawni, that which is set to happen of both good and bad. إذن, as a result, فرق بين الإرادة الشرعية والإرادة الكونية. Then remember this distinction between Allah's wishing things to happen by calling to it, by calling to those things and inviting to those things and legislating rulings about those things, which may or may not take place from the side of the servant, and the irada kawniyya, when Allah legislates or Allah decrees for a matter to take place within the creation, then there is no one who could resist and there is no one who could go outside of that qadr. وأمر الله سبحانه وتعالى العباد جميعا بطاعته وطاعة رسله وبطاعة أولي الأمر. And Allah, the Most High, has ordered the servants, all of them, to obey Him and to obey His messengers and to obey the people in authority. And to stop there, Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anfal, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, not in Anfal, sorry, أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولِي الْأَمْنِ مِنْكُمْ. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey the messenger and all of those in authority amongst you. Shaykh Muhammad Aman says, فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَطَاعَ. So some of them have obeyed. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَصَى. Some of them have disobeyed. وَعَلِمَ اللَّهُ وَقَدَّرَ مَنْ يَعْصِي وَمَنْ يُطِيعُ. And Allah knows, and He is the one who put that qadr into this creation, those who would disobey and those who would obey. He knows about it, and He is the one who decreed it to happen from the qadr kawni. وَمَا أَرَادَهُ اللَّهُ كَوْنًا وَعَلِمَهُ وَكَتَبَهُ وَقَدَّرَهُ وَشَاءَهُ. And regarding what Allah has willed to take place in the creation, with His knowledge, with His order to be written, with His qadr, His order for it to become qadr, and His will for it to happen, فَلَا بُدَّ مِن تَحَقُّقِهِ. Then it is something that must take place in every situation. فالله سبحانه وتعالى يريد الإرادة يريد بالإرادة الكونية الإيمان والكفر. So Allah the Mighty, or so Allah the Glorified and Most High, He wants He has decreed for things to happen within His creation, like faith and disbelief. He has decreed for disbelief to take place. وَطَاعَةَ وَالْمَعْصِيَّةِ, and He has willed for obedience to happen as well as disobedience to happen. وَالْخَيْرَ وَالشَّرَّ, and He has willed or decreed for good to happen and for bad to happen. إِذْ لَا يَقَعُ فِي مُلْكِهِ إِلَّا مَا يَشَاءُ, as nothing actually takes place in His creation except what He has willed to take place. فَمَنِ اعْتَقَدَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُرِيدُ إِلَّا الْخَيْرَ فَقَطْ. So pay attention, because some people have this misunderstanding. So whoever believes that Allah only wants good things, Allah only wants good things to happen, فَإِنْ كَانَ يَقْصُدُ بِالْإِرَادَةِ فَإِنْ كَانَ يَقْصُدُ الْإِرَادَةَ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ, if the person who said that meant by what he legislates and what he calls to and what he orders his servants to do, فَهَذَا صَحِيح, and this is correct, that that's only good. There is nothing that Allah has ordered you to do except there's goodness in it, and that it's all good. And there's nothing that Allah has forbidden you from and told you not to do except that it is bad and it is harmful, short term and long term. Tayyib. So that's correct to say Allah only wants good things to happen. But if that's related to the qadr shar'i only, when you understand that qadr is two types, that that's as it relates to His rulings and what He has invited the people to. وَإِنْ أَرَادَ الْإِرَادَةَ الْكَوْنِيَّةَ, and some people really intend this. They say Allah does not want children to die, and they mean the qadr al-kawni. Allah does not want disbelief. How could Allah want evil things to happen? Right? This is what they say. فَهَذَا اعْتِقَادٌ خَاطِئ, this is a mistaken belief. This is erroneous as a belief. فَإِنَّمَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ كَانَ, because verily what Allah has willed, it exists. وَمَا لَمْ يَشَأْ لَمْ يَكُنْ, and what Allah has not willed, it does not exist. Let's take it a step further beyond the sharh of Shaykh Muhammad Aman to illustrate it. For the one who says Allah does not want disasters, it's beyond Allah to decree disasters that cause death and the loss of life, calamities and things like this. These are not something that Allah has decreed. I cannot say Allah has decreed these. I'm afraid to say that about Allah. Some people, they talk like this. Then we have a simple question. Then who willed them into existence? Who allowed them to take place? Whose qadr is it that overwhelms the qadr of Allah then? Logical questions, right? If Allah didn't want that hurricane that killed that number of people, then who sent the hurricane? Who overpowered Rabb al-Alameen and His qadr? That is kalam, that this is a kind of speech of people that they have not thought about their argument very well. They have not thought about their words or their position very well. So we say, Allah wants good things and only good things. Al-irada al-shar'iyya, the way He wants things and He legislates and He calls to those things. He wants belief and He doesn't want you to disbelieve. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. Allah wants ease for you and He doesn't want hardship for you. That's the irada what? Shar'iyya, what Allah has legislated. It is good, it is wholesome, it is ease, it is beneficial for mankind. And then Allah wants both good and bad as it relates to everything that has happened. There must be evil so that good can be appreciated. There must be loss of blessings so the blessings can be appreciated, so that the servants can be thankful to Allah, so they can draw near to Allah with their thankfulness. This is not paradise, this is the dunya. If this is paradise, then there's no evil. Qadr, kawni, there's nothing, no trials, no afflictions, because that's paradise. It's the abode of reward. This is the abode of being tested. So where would the test be if we had no evil to face? Where would the test in our life be if there were no calamities, no losses, nothing but good, prosperous growth, happiness? Where's the test for mankind? How would we know who is grateful to Allah and who is ingrateful to Allah? if there were no losses and there were no trials and tribulations. But from the wisdom of Allah Ta'ala, that He put us here in this short life to be tested and tried through a various number of different types of trials and tribulations. And from that wisdom of Allah Azza wa Jal, we understand that there must be certain events that are evil, difficulty, calamities and so on, for us to be tested and for us to earn the pleasure of Allah throughout those tests. Having said that, we move on in the text to the statement of the author. ثم صار هذا الأصل لا يعرف عند أكثر من يدعي العلم فكيف العمل به. He said, then this foundation of obeying the Muslim leader has been unknown to many of the people who even themselves claim to have knowledge. So what about those, or so how could it be even acted upon? If the very foundation itself was not known, and people are ignorant of it, then how would their action be of it? You know? The first two foundations in general are known, yet the people's actions are short, and they're not, fulfilling what they know. Here, the people don't seem to even know about the foundation. The people seem to say, no, that's not from our religion. We don't support anyone who would, fall into any amount of oppression. We only support righteous leaders and so on. So people don't even seem to know about the foundation of obeying the Muslim leaders, so as to apply it and to look at how well they're even applying it. The Shaikh Muhammad Aman, he goes on to say in his explanation of that passage, بعد هذا ثم صار هذا الأصل. And this foundation has gone on to become, and he's talking about السمع والطاعة, hearing and obeying the Muslim leader. لا يعرف عند أكثر من يدعي العلم. Is not something unknown to most of the people who claim to have knowledge. فأمر الطاعة والسمع لا يعرف على الحقيقة عند أكثر من يدعي العلم. So the affair of knowledge, or the affair of obedience and hearing and listening, is something unknown in its pure and unadulterated understanding. It's something unknown to most of the people who claim to have knowledge. فَكَيْفَ الْعَمَلُ بِهِ. So how could they even act upon it or call to it or lead the people who need the knowledge from them to understand it? إِذَا كَانَ الْعِلْمُ نَفْسُهُ مَفْقُودًا. If the knowledge itself is absent, فَالْعَمَلُ مِنْ بَابٍ أَوْلَى. Then the action that is correct based on that knowledge must be absent, even in a more clearly way. Even in a clearer way. وَرُبَّمَا ظَنَّ بَعْضُهُمْ أَنَّهُ لَا يَجِبُ السَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ وَالْبَيْعَةُ إِلَّا إِذَا كَانَ الْوَالِي عَادِلًا عَالِمًا. And perhaps many of them, or perhaps some of them, they assume that it's not an obligation to hear and obey and give their allegiance to someone who is not a righteous and knowledgeable leader. وَإِذَا كَانَ بِخِلَافِ ذَلِكَ فَلَا طَاعَةَ وَلَا سَمْعَ وَلَا بَيْعَ. And they may have assumed that if it's not the case, he's not knowledgeable and not righteous, then there is no obedience, there is no listening, and there is no allegiance to such a ruler. وَهَذِهِ مِنَ الْأَخْطَاءِ الشَّائِعَةِ الْيَوْمِ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. And this is from the mistakes which are widespread amongst the people today. وَهُوَ خَطَأٌ شَرْعًا وَعَقْلًا. And it is an error as it relates to the texts, shar'an, the religion, the legislation, and aqlan, and as well for people of intellect, they should recognize the error of it. وَمَنْ رَزَقَهُ اللَّهُ الْعَقْلَ السَّلِيمِ. And for those who Allah has blessed with or provided with intellects, untainted intellects, وَيُدْرِكُ الْأُمُورِ عَلَى حَقِيقَتِهَا, and they can see matters for what they are in reality. وَلَهُ مَعْرِفَةٌ بِتَارِيخِ سَلَفِنَا, and they have some knowledge of the history of our Salaf. وَلَهُ مَعْرِفَةٌ بِالدِّينِ يُدْرَكُ أو يُدْرِكُ تَمَامًا. And if they have some understanding of the religion, then they will understand completely and clearly بأن السمع والطاعة والبيعة والمحافظة على ذلك واجبة مطلقة. And they would know that hearing and obeying, giving allegiance and guarding after that pledge of allegiance, all of that is an obligation in a very unrestricted way, or a very comprehensive way, an obligation upon everyone. سواء كان الوالي عادلا أو فاجرا, whether the authority was upright or disobedient, أو مؤثرا أو منفقا, whether he would prefer himself and those who he likes with the spending of the Muslim wealth, or he spends it fairly and he spreads the wealth. محسنا أو مسيئا, whether he is someone who does things proficiently and with goodness, or he does things the wrong way. مطلقا, all of those types of leaders in general. ما لم يظهر منه الكفر البواح, so long as clear, obvious, open disbelief does not come from him. طيب. He's referring to here the hadith of Ubadah ibn al-Samit radiyallahu anhu, which is found in the two Sahihs of al-Bukhari and Muslim, that he mentioned that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam would accept the pledge of allegiance from the people, and he would say about their bay'ah, about their pledge of allegiance, bay'ana ala sam'i, or bay'nahu, we gave him the pledge of allegiance, ala sam'i wa ta'ati, to hear and to obey. These are the companions saying, we gave the Messenger the pledge of allegiance, to hear and to obey, fi manshatina wa makrahina, in the things that are things that we like, and the things that we are nasheed about, things that we're ready to do, and as well the things that we dislike, as well the things that we don't like and we're not ready to do. وَعُسْرِنَا وَيُسْرِنَا, things which are difficult for us and things which are easy for us. وَأَثَرَةٍ عَلَيْنَا, and even when choices are made to prefer people over us who we feel we are more virtuous than, or more deserving of either salaries or gifts, and so on. وَأَنْ لَا نُنَازِعَ الْأَمْرَ أَهْلَهُ, and that we do not challenge those in authority. We do not challenge those in authority over us. We do not try to take the authority from them. إِلَّا أَن تَرَوْا كُفْرًا بَوَاحًا, and he said to them, except if you see clear, manifest, obvious disbelief. عِنْدُكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ فِيهِ بُرْهَانٍ, that you have clear evidence from Allah Ta'ala. That hadith is collected by men, by both al-Bukhari and Muslim, from the riwayah, from the narration of Ubadah ibn al-Samit. So the Shaykh is referring to the kufr bawah there in that hadith, that you are required to hear and obey in all matters that you like and dislike, that are easy for you and difficult for you, agreeable, disagreeable matters, so long as they are halal and not haram matters. Then you hear and you obey until you see kufr bawah, until you see clear, manifest, open kufr. Then you are not required to hear and obey in such case. The Shaykh says, وَمَعْنَى الْبَوَاحِ, and the meaning of something being clear and manifest, الْكُفْرُ الَّذِي يَبُوحُ بِهِ وَيُعْلِنُهُ, the kufr that he says openly and he announces. هذا معنى البواح, this is the meaning of the word بواح, manifest, open and clear. ليس الكفر الخفي, it's not a kind of discreet or hidden kind of disbelief. الذي لا يدرك, that which is not understood so easily except through investigation. بل الكفر الذي يعلن به ويدعو إليه, rather it is the kind of disbelief that he openly announces and he calls to. Subhanallah. مثلا, the Shaykh goes on to say, here's an example. لو دعا الحاكم إلى ترك الصلاة, for example, the leader, the so-called Muslim leader, he calls the people to abandon the salah, right? فهذا أباح بكفره وأعلن به. This is a person who has openly manifested his disbelief and he has openly announced his disbelief in his request for the people to stop praying. And while it is very sad, leaders of so-called Muslim countries, they require, in some instances, government workers to not make salah, to allow the time to enter and to exit, and they have not made salah. And some of them are so evil that they will even follow up to make sure that no one makes the salah, as if that's where they should be putting their energies, to making sure that people follow those rules of kufr, right? And they do not make the salah in its time. Now, وَكَذَا لَوْ أَمَرَ الْمُجْتَمَعَ بِأَنْ يَتْرُكُوا صِيَامَ رَمَضَانَ. Similarly, like the leader who would tell the people to stop fasting in Ramadan, لِأَنْ لَا يُضَاعَفُوا عَنَ الْإِنْتَاجِ, so that they don't become weak in their production, like those who work at factories or those who produce things, that during Ramadan they might produce less. So the ruler says, keeping in mind the economy, he says, don't fast, rather keep working and push out all of the normal products that we normally do. فَهَذَا أَعْلَنَ بِكُفْرِهِ. Such a person has openly announced his disbelief. فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ لَا طَاعَةَ لَهُ وَلَا بَيْعَةَ لَهُ وَلَا سَمْعَ لَهُ. Then such a person is a disbeliever, and there is no obedience to him, and no pledge of allegiance, and no listening to him. وَلَوْ أَعْلَنَ أَنَّ الشَّرِيعَةَ الْإِسْلَامِيَّةَ في الوقت الحاضر غير صالحة للعمل بها. For example, another leader might announce openly or make a decree or write a constitution that includes this kind of meaning, that what? The Islamic legislation in these days and times is not befitting to be applied. وَقَدْ كَانَتْ صَالِحَةً فِي الْعَهْدِ السَّابِقِ. Even if he says it was appropriate for the past, in times in the past, أما الآن فلا تصح or لا تصلح ولا بد من استيراد قوانين. And he says, as for now it's not befitting, and rather what we must do is bring in systems of ruling, systems of legislation, إما من الخارج, whether we bring them in from foreign lands by adopting the ruling systems of foreign lands, أو من وضعها محليا, or whether we invent it here in our place, تكون قوانين مرنة توافق رغبات الناس. They should be rules that we announce, that are heard openly, that correspond to the inclinations of the people, like what they call for in Egypt. When they say freedom, freedom, they didn't mean freedom to practice Islam. They meant freedom to be a pianist, freedom to be a homosexual, freedom to be a dancer and a singer, and freedom to do all of those things which are impermissible in Islam. And you found foolish people amongst those who thought they were with their brothers in Islam, calling for the freedom to practice the Sharia openly, holding hands with singers and dancers and those who had all kinds of strange ideas about what freedom is. And this is what we have found in Egypt, and look at the level of success they have reached with their coming together and their efforts to overthrow their rulers and whatnot. أما هذه الشريعة, they would say, as for this Sharia, فجافة لا تصلح. So many people, they talk like that. It's strict, it's dry, it's not appropriate for these times. فهذا, people who come together for this purpose, a ruler who speaks like this, فهذا أعلن بكفره كفرا بواحا. This person, he has openly announced his disbelief with a kufr that is open and manifest and clear. فَلَا طَاعَةَ لَهُ وَلَا سَمْعَ وَلَا بَيْعَةَ. So for him there is no obedience, no listening, and no pledge of allegiance. هذا معنى الكفر البواح. This is the meaning of the open manifest kind of kufr. فَالسَّمْعُ وَالطَّاعَةُ تجب ما لم يصل الحاكم إلى درجة الكفر البواح. So hearing and obeying, the base rule on that is that it's obligatory so long as the ruler of the Muslims has not reached the level of that kind of disbelief, that open, manifest kufr al-bawah. وَلَوْ رَاجَعْنَا تَارِيخَنَا. If we were to look back at our history, the history of the Ummah, نجد أن بعض الصغار الصحابة الذين أدركوا بعض الخلفاء والملوك الجائرين الظالمين كالحجاج بن يوسف الثقفي. we'll find that some of the lesser Sahaba, meaning some of the youth of the Sahaba who lived very long, they reached a time where the Ummah was ruled by caliphs, by kings that were oppressive, that were transgressive. The likes of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, كانوا يصلون خلفهم, with their transgression and their evil, those Sahaba, would pray behind them. وَيُجَاهِدُونَ تَحْتَ رَايَتِهِمْ, and they would take part in the military operations of jihad under their flag, under the flag of those oppressive rulers. وَيُطِيعُونَهُمْ فِي كُلِّ مَا يَأْمُرُونَ بِهِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنْهُ, and they would obey them in everything that they ordered, and they would refrain from everything they forbade them from. مَا لَمْ يَأْمُرُوا بِمَعْصِيَّةٍ, so long as they were not being ordered to do something of disobedience. And in a footnote, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَا طَاعَةِ لِمَخْلُوقٍ فِي مَعْصِيَّةِ الْخَالِقِ, there is no obedience to the creation in disobedience of the Creator. على هذا مضى السلف الصالح الذين أدركوا زمن الأهواء, and upon this understanding were the Salaf, the righteous Salaf, those who reached the times where desires became prominent. بعد أن فسدت أخلاق كثير من الأمراء والحكام, and the mannerisms of many of the rulers and the leaders had become corrupt. فهذا الذي عليه الناس قديما, this is the matter, this is the way that the earliest people were upon. واليوم لا يسع المسلمين إلا ما وسع الأولين, and today there is nothing that is going to be good, or nothing that will work for the people, the Muslims today, except that which worked for the first of them. يقول إمام دار الهجرة, the Imam, the chief of Dar al-Hijrah, the city of Al-Madinah where the Hijrah was made to, Malik ibn Anas, the great scholar Imam Malik, may Allah have mercy on him, rahimahullah, he said, لا يصلح آخر هذه الأمة إلا ما أصلح أولها. Nothing is going to correct the later generations of this ummah, or the latter part of this ummah, except the thing that corrected the first part of the ummah. وفي رواية, in one narration, لا يصلح آخر هذه الأمة إلا ما صلح به أولها. The ummah, the latter part of this ummah, will not be correct or will not be righteous except through what made the first part of this ummah righteous. وَلَعَلَ لَا يُصْلِحُ أَوْضَحُ. And if we were to say لَا يُصْلِحُ, meaning nothing will make this ummah correct, that would be better. That's an Arabic language point. لَا يُصْلِحُ أَمْرَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ الْيَوْمَ إِلَّا مَا أَصْلَحَ أَمْرَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Nothing is going to correct the situation of the Muslims today other than what corrected the situation of the Muslims of old. وَإِنَّمَا صَلُحَ أَمْرُهُمْ بِالْاجْتِمَاعِ وَعَدَمِ التَّفَرُّقِ. And their situation was only made upright through their unity, their coming together, and their staying away from splitting up. وَالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ وَعَدَمِ الْخُرُوجِ عَلَى الْوُلَاةِ. And their hearing, and their obeying, and their lack of rebellion against the rulers. ولا يعني الخروج دائما الخروج ولا يعني الخروج ولا يعني الخروج دائما الخروج بالسلاح. It doesn't always mean when we say rebellion that rebellion is only with military might or with weapons. بل التمرد على الأوامر يعتبر خروجا على السلطة. For a person to be openly resistant to the orders of those in authority, that is a kind of rebellion as well against the rulers. هذا ما يجهله كثير من المنتسبين إلى العلم. That's a matter which has been, many of the claimants to knowledge have remained ignorant of. فما بال الذين لا علم عندهم. So what would you think if this is the case of those who claim to have knowledge? What about those rank and file people that don't claim to have knowledge? They don't have knowledge. وَأَيْضًا إِذَا جَهِلُوا هَذَا الْعِلْمِ And as well think that if the people are ignorant of this understanding or this knowledge, فَالْعَمَلُ مِنْ بَابٍ أَوْلَى So then to act correctly, that would be based on that knowledge that they don't have, is even more so understood that it is lost. لأن العلم قبل القول والعمل Because knowledge is before statements and actions. أولا العلم ثانيا العمل Firstly there is knowledge, and then after that there is action. ولا يتم العلم بمجرد الاطلاع على النصوص Knowledge is not attained by merely coming across passages in books or reading passages from books. لأن الناس يختلفون في فهمهم للنصوص Because the people are on various differing levels as it relates to how they understand those texts that they read. لذا And for that reason يجب أن تفهم النصوص بمفهوم السلف الصالح And that is why the texts are required to be understood with the understanding of the righteous Salaf. وَمَنْ يَفْهَمُ النُّصُوصَ عَلَى نَحْوِ فَهْمِ السَّلَفِ الصَّالِحِ So whoever understands the texts, and the texts here are the Quran and the Sunnah being referred to, whoever understands them as the righteous Salaf did, فَهُوَ عَلَى خَيْرٍ Then he is upon goodness. وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ مَنْهَجِ السَّلَفِ And who turns away Anyone who turns away from the way or the methodology of the righteous Salaf, وَفَهْمِهِمْ لِلنُّصُوص And their way of understanding the texts, وَاتَّخَذَ طَرِيقًا جَدِيدًا And they follow or they assume a new path and take on a new path, لِيَسِيرَ فِيهِ مُسْتَقِلًا عَنِ السَّلَفِ الصَّالِحِ So that they could be independent and not upon the same way as the righteous early Salaf. Whoever does that, ضَاعَتَ الْأُمَّةِ They will cause the ummah to be lost. وَهَذَا لَا يُمْكِنُ أَن يُعَالَجَ إِلَّا بِالتَّوْبَةِ وَالرُّجُوعِ إِلَى اللَّهِ And this matter can only be rectified if a person repents and returns back to Allah with obedience, seeking the correct understanding. هذا ما وصل إليه أمر جمهور المسلمين اليوم This is the situation that we find the majority of the Muslims in today. إذ تركت العقيدة السلفية التي كان عليها سلف هذه الأمة Where the majority of the people have left off the correct aqidah of the Salaf, that which the Salaf were upon, the Salaf of this ummah. وَتَرَكَتْ أَحْكَامَ الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ تَرْكًا وَاضِحًا And they have abandoned the rulings. The majority of the people have abandoned the rulings found in the book and the Sunnah with a very obvious kind of abandonment. وَأُعْرِضَ عَنْهَا And they have turned away from those things. وَاسْتُبْدِلَتْ بِأَحْكَامٍ وَضْعِيَّةٍ And in so many Muslim societies, those rulings in Islam have been replaced with man-made laws. وَجُهِلَتِ السِّيَاسَةُ الشَّرْعِيَّةُ تَمَامًا And correct political politics has been lost or has been unknown, not known of, entirely unknown. وَاسْتُبْدِلَتْ بِالسِّيَاسَةِ الْعَصْرِيَّةِ And it's been replaced by modern day politics. التي كلها كذب ونفاق All of which are lies and hypocrisy. وهذا عين ما فعله جمهور المسلمين وخصوصا المثقفين And this is exactly what the majority of the Muslims have undertaken, and especially those who are cultured and educated. الذين أعرضوا عن دين الله تعالى الذي جاء به هذا الرسول الكريم عليه الصلاة والسلام Those who have turned away from the religion of Allah the Most High, the one that His noble messenger came with. May Allah raise his rank and grant him peace. إِذَنْ لَا بُدَّ مِنَ الْاجْتِمَاعِ عَلَى الدِّينِ And so therefore, as a result, it is a must that we unite upon the proper understanding of Islam, upon the religion. وَلَا يَتِمُّ الْاجْتِمَاعِ, and our unity could never be complete إِلَّا except بِالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ عَلَى مَا شُرِحَ, except with hearing and obeying as has been explained to you. I'll add a takmila here, as the text of the third principle has been completed. The explanation of Shaykh Muhammad Aman has been read and explained. I'll add here, according to the way the author ended his discussion on the first principle, or the first foundation that so many people have lost. And the second one, how many people have lost this principle. Remember how he ended those principles? He said that, and it's gone so far that the only one who calls, the people who now in this ummah call to the first principle, making all acts of worship to Allah, shunning all acts of shirk, they are viewed as being zanadiqa and mutashaddideen, people of harshness and eccentricity, eccentric, excessive people of excessiveness in the religion, or hypocrites. The same thing with those who call to true unity, unity upon the book and the sunnah and the way of the salaf. The only ones who call to that are labeled and blamed by the people with a number of labels and blames, that they are troublemakers, that they are what? Strict, that they are ulad, that they are excessive, that they are people of harshness and difficulty. So let's add something like that with the style of the author here. We would say here, then it's gone so much that the only people who call today to hearing and obeying, they are the ones who the people say about them what? Scholars for dollars. The ulama al-sultan, they're the scholars and the paid employees of the rulers. They only speak in a way that makes the rulers happy. They are the pets and the watchdogs of the rulers, and so on. You've heard this much from the people of takfir. You hear it very clearly and loudly coming right from this ISIS group, that the ulama, like Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, these are scholars for the hukam. They have no sincerity, they have no dedication to Islam, they have no real care for the ummah. And some of them boast about when they come to Saudi Arabia, they plan to remove the head of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan. This is the Islamic government that the people are calling to, saying we are not Khawarij. We are not Khawarij, huh? If you are not Khawarij, then why do you kill the Muslims for their sins? And if you're not Khawarij, then what plans would exist amongst you to kill the very best of this ummah, the likes of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan? You are sufaha. You are people who, just like Abdullah ibn Abbaas said, you have no one with you from the Sahaba. When Abdullah ibn Abbaas went to the Khawarij and they rebelled, and they were rebelling against the Muslims, Abdullah ibn Abbas said, who do you have with you? Which Sahabi, which scholar is with you? Which person of knowledge is with you? That same question can be asked to the Khawarij today. What people of knowledge are with you? Name a scholar that this ummah knows, that has supported you and said, yes, this is the true Islamic state, and all of the Muslims should give their hands in allegiance to this Islamic state. Name one scholar that Muslims truly knew of before the advent of this group. They'll list you a long list of names that you've never heard of before, and they'll give you the pitch that you don't know all the scholars. There are so many scholars all over Allah's earth and you don't know them. And it's a trick, my dear brothers and sisters. Those are not scholars. Those are the invented, propped up pieces of wood that they're putting in front of you to make you think these scholars support them. The scholars are those who are well known. They existed a couple years ago, before ISIS existed. And they are available for anyone who stands up to promote Islam, and they will support them and they will have their hands with their hands. Yet when the Khawarij pop up, when people of deviance pop up, you will find the scholars of Islam will speak against them. And our scholars have told us that whoever has given them the pledge of allegiance has given the pledge of allegiance to a shaitan, to the devil himself. You do not give the pledge of allegiance to the Khawarij, rather the Khawarij. And battling against the Khawarij is jihad fi sabilillah. Fighting against them is jihad in the way of Allah. Real, true jihad. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said if he met them that he would fight them with the fighting of Ad, with the destruction intended like how Ad was destroyed. And he mentioned the rewards for those who had reached the time of the Khawarij and fight them. So don't be tricked by a media campaign, by a nice video or a nice invitation to understand how ISIS really truly implements a balanced Sharia with no excessiveness and all of that. Rather go to your scholars and ask your scholars, is this call a call to rectifying Allah's earth? Is this call a call to implementation of the Sharia that we support and that we get behind? And your scholars will not fail you. But look at their plot. Their plot is to say, your scholars are only scholars for dollars. But we can negate that and we can reject that. Look at the strength of the words of Shaykh Muhammad Aman al-Jami, who wasn't even a Saudi, wasn't even a Saudi, he's from Habasha. Look at his words. Look at his words of scholarship. Look at his piety. He wouldn't take the salary that was given to him as a professor at the academic institute in Riyadh. And he would sleep in the masjid. Subhanallah. Scholars for dollars. Look closely at those being called scholars for dollars, the real ulama, the scholars of Islam, and you will find them pious people. You will not find them extravagant people. For sure there are people who have knowledge of Islam and they'd like to sell that knowledge for money and for wealth and for precious jewels and whatever. They would like that. Then one of the signs of those people is the presence of money, the presence of wealth, the presence of extravagant wealth. You won't find in such people generosity in helping the people and they themselves have nothing. Subhanallah. Shaykh ibn Baz, it was said about him, scholar for dollar, right? Government agent, scholar and all of that. Yet the people don't know his salary from the government was given out months ahead of its time to the poor and the needy before it even came down. And so when people would come to his office where people managed his money to request some assistance because he promised them something, some of them will be told, I'm sorry, we have nothing for you. And they would say, but the Shaykh promised me some assistance. And they would say, quite frankly, I'm sorry, but he has given away his income for the next number of months and he has nothing that he could offer you at this time. These are your scholars for dollars. Scholars with no furniture in their house, who sit on the floor as you are now. A scholar for dollars would have a very extravagant house, I'm sure, wouldn't he? There's a scholar for dollars. He's not sitting on the floor. He's not sleeping in the masjid. He's not giving away his entire salary in charity. What would the point of being a scholar for dollars be if he doesn't want the money? That's a person who's greedy, and a person who wants money. Think and reflect and look past the claims that people make. Some people want you to think that simply by taking a salary from the Muslim government puts you in a category of being a paid employee of the government. Subhanallah. Go back in Islamic history throughout the years of the Khulafa. What do you think the job of the Muslim ruler is when it comes to promoting the religion? His obligation is to set up scholars to teach and to fund them, to travel and to call to Islam and to teach, to put salaries for them so they can be full-time, dedicated to teaching the people. That's the job of Wali al-Amr. That's his obligation that Allah put on him. He's accountable in front of Allah that the wealth that he has been blessed with is used to promote the religion, to make the ulama available to the people. So how in the world is it a point of criticism that the scholar is on a salary from the government? Because that's the foundation of Islam that has always existed. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, how did he fund Mu'adh ibn Jabal when he sent him to Yemen? Do you know? He sent him to Yemen to be a qadi, to be a ruler. Where did he get the money from? How did he make his living? How did he manage to live? He would live by the zakat money that he would collect there. He would live by the endorsement, the backing of the Muslim government that sent him. So he would collect the zakat from the kinds of zakat, or the ways you spend the zakat is on the workers that collect the zakat, right? So from the treasury of the Muslim state, you would organize the payments for those who would collect the zakat and those who manage the zakat monies. And Mu'adh ibn Jabal was one of the many that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent. And the Messenger would give to the people, and the people would receive money from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This went on in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and Umar organized it more. The second Khalifa, he organized salaries in a way that hadn't been done before. Rawatib, and he salaries, and he set everything in place and organized it even more. From the very beginning of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, this is the way of Islam. That the scholars are paid financially to be available. They are supported financially by the Muslim state as an obligation, not an option, not an act of charity or benevolence. As an obligation, it is required that the Muslim rulers support and finance the spread of this religion. So where is the blame? How is that a blameworthy thing? If you cooperate with the Muslim rulers who tell you to spread the message of Islam based on the book, the Sunnah, and the way of the Salaf, how can you be blamed? This is the way that Allah Ta'ala facilitates for these people to be available to everyone around the clock. And these scholars for dollars, subhanAllah, that people would like to call them, the likes of Shaykh Abdul-Aziz ibn Baz, the likes of Shaykh Abdul-Aziz Ali Shaykh, the current present Mufti, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala. I visited him in his house, and I visited him in his masjid, and I attended his lectures at some of the masajid. And the man is nothing but a walking form of assistance to the Muslims. That everywhere he goes, he's being questioned by the Muslims about matters. He sits to wait for salat, there's someone on his right or left asking a question. After the salat, he's being asked. He's ushered back to his house. Why? Because there are people there waiting with questions. Phone calls ringing at his house. His time for relaxation. Last year I was blessed to visit him and to see his time for relaxing after Asr in his house, in his private sitting area. Comes and sits on the floor like you people are sitting on the floor. He's an old man, he's blind. And he comes in and he sits on the floor like you people are sitting on the floor. And he leans back and he has people reading books to him and people asking him questions, women on the phone calling with issues. So he's between a question, reading a passage from a book, answering a comment or a point of concern, picking up a phone call. That's his relaxation time. These are your scholars for dollars. Wallahu musta'an. The trick is to turn you against your scholars by any number of ways. To say they're employees, or to say they don't care about you. And these are the ulama. They say they don't care about you. They make this image that they're so engrossed in their books like this, they never even look at you. They're just buried in these books. That's all they are. Academically buried in books. They don't even know you or care about you. Who's saying this? The people who wish to turn you away from your scholars. When you go there, you will see nothing of this sort. If you visit your ulama, you will see nothing of these claims. You will see concern and love. You will see the likes of our ulama answering the phone in the middle of the night. You don't answer the phone in the middle of the night. You know, if you have a call at 3 in the morning, you probably just turn the phone over and get it in the morning. Ulama answering the phone 24 hours a day, worried about the situation in the various Muslim lands. Phone calls from Algeria, from Nigeria, from Pakistan, from India, phone calls coming in from all over the world, all hours of the day and night, and they're answering the phone. Subhanallah, worried and concerned. And when we would come to, we would listen and sit with our Shaikh Rabi' ibn Hadi, and we would see people come with concerns about the da'wah from various lands, and we would hear stories about how the da'wah was unsuccessful in a certain place, and what happened, and the Shaykh would be giving his advice, and you would see tears in the eyes of the Shaykh that the da'wah didn't make progress, that the da'wah wasn't moving forward, that someone wasn't behaving as a proper da'i should, and so on. You would see tears of sadness from the man's eyes, that he wanted the da'wah to be successful. The men who would read from books of seerah, books of history about the imams of guidance and the troubles that they faced, and he would listen to those stories, and he would ask the reader, Aywa, what happened next? What happened next? Like how the people of entertainment watch TV and they're entertained by these stories. He would listen to the reading of the seerah of the Imams and his heart would be involved. Hafidhahullah ta'ala. May Allah ta'ala preserve him. He would be involved and engaged. And these are the people that you're saying scholars for dollars, not concerned for the ummah. In fact, it's the opposite. They're the least of the people ever to be referred to as greedy, out for money. They're the last of Allah's creation, by Allah's permission, that they are unconcerned for the ummah, that they don't care much about what's going on. The people who trick you, they say, the event that happened yesterday, when an event happens in the world, something happened in a certain country yesterday, why is the Shaikh not speaking about it? See, he's silent. He doesn't know about the ummah. He doesn't know what's happening. And you find some politically ambitious so-called Shaikh ready to pop up and speak as soon as it's in the newspapers. Why is that? Ambition. And what? Sloppy approach. Lack of concern for establishing the facts before speech. And our scholars that, yes, something happened yesterday, they're not going to speak until all the facts are in, until they've heard what has happened from reliable sources, not from the non-Muslim news agencies and whatnot. But they take time to sort through the matter so that when they speak with what will be clean and pure benefit based on accurate facts. So these sick-minded people, they come and they say, look at your scholars, they won't talk. So I'll talk because I love you, because I'm concerned for you, because I know you need to hear scholarly advice now. So let me talk and I'll tell you what we should be doing. Because those older scholars, those senior scholars, they're just too busy sitting in their air conditioning with their faces buried in the books. That's the trick that they have. Some of the tricks we've discussed this evening. And may Allah Ta'ala give us basira, give us insight, allow us to be critical of the claims that people make against the very best of Allah's awliya, the very best of Allah's beloved, of His closest worshippers. May Allah give us true insight to go beyond what is being said and see the reality of those who care about us and those who are concerned for us. Subhanallah. هذا والله أعلم. صلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. And I remind you that we'll come back again, insha'Allah ta'ala, tomorrow at, I believe, Maghrib time. Yeah? And we'll take, insha'Allah ta'ala, the 4th and 5th, hopefully, insha'Allah ta'ala, principles tomorrow, which would leave for us the 6th principle on Sunday, and perhaps some time for some questions and answers. And Allah ta'ala knows best. Some questions that have been sent up before that I haven't answered yet. There are some people who accuse the students of knowledge of causing separation and backbiting when they point out errors in some of the other callers. Could you please clarify this? Very basically, yes. There are good students of knowledge who cause separation in a way that is praiseworthy. They separate truth from falsehood. And they backbite in a way that is praiseworthy. They backbite people of falsehood and point out their falsehood with accuracy and precision. And those students of knowledge, they have your wala and your bara. You have allegiance with them and loyalty to them. They are your brothers in Salafiyah. And you should not give your ear to those who wish to criticize such people. If they're pointing out errors in manhaj, meaning mistakes in the way people would have you practice Islam, then they are doing you a great service. And we do not put the reputation of a person above purity and clarity in the religion. We don't say that you cannot talk about this person spreading falsehood because the reputation of a Muslim is to be protected. Yes, the reputation of a Muslim is protected because of the reputation of Islam, not over and beyond the reputation of Islam and the religion and the clarity of the teachings. So when there's a clash here and a person begins to twist the religion and misrepresent the religion, we cannot put his reputation up higher above the religion and say, in this case, we have to defend him, you have to be quiet about him, and you have to preserve his honor. We cannot say that. In this case, and this has been the understanding of our ummah throughout history, they wrote books of jarh and ta'deel, of criticism and praise of those who would convey this religion, and that goes on until today. The criticism of people, the warnings against people who misrepresent the religion of Islam, that is an obligation, a fard kifa'i. It must be fulfilled by the people who have knowledge of those deviations. Because the religion is to be pure for Allah. The religion is not to be left to be a playground for whoever wishes to say whatever they want. We have to love and uphold the religion of Allah firstly and foremostly. And then whoever is in line with the religion of Allah, we uphold and defend that person's reputation. But whoever chooses from his own decision to violate this religion, to contradict this religion, to lie on this religion, to twist this religion, then your reputation, la karama, we will not uphold your reputation. And we do that to please Allah Ta'ala, as we could not allow the religion to become corrupt, seeking to, protect one man's reputation. And all of the Muslims now misunderstand their religion as a result of our protecting one person. Islam does not teach us to think like this. No. The Prophet ﷺ was approached by Fatima bint Qais al-Ansariyah. She approached him because two of the Sahaba had sought her hand in marriage, and she said, Abu Jahm wa Muawiyah khatabani. She mentioned the two companions that they had sought her hand in marriage. She was seeking the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, "Amma Muawiyah, amma Muawiyah fasu'lukun la mala lahu." As for Muawiyah, he's poor and he has no money. Wa amma Abu Jahm fa la yarfa'u asahu an atiqihi. As for Abu Jahm, he doesn't lift the stick up off his shoulder, meaning. Some scholars said it means kathir as-safar, that he travels a lot, and thus the wife would suffer. And some said that means darrab al-nisa, that he beats the women, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. Here the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam spoke negatively about two companions. Why did he do that? Was he a backbiter? A'udhu billah. Was he a backbiter? Was he a person who didn't respect the reputation of the Muslim? A'udhu billah. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Here, the need to be protected from a harm for even one woman here takes precedence over preserving the reputation of the people being asked about. Here she is a woman and she is in the time of need. She needs to know defects, problems, shortcomings. She will marry one of them. She's thinking of marrying one of them and she has a right to know. And that marriage was a dunya thing. Marriage is a dunya matter. What about all of the Muslims and their right to understand how to worship Allah properly? Don't they have a right to know Allah and a right to know how to worship Allah? And if someone comes to interfere with that right, don't we have the right to reject him? Don't we have the obligation upon us to warn against him and to clarify that the religion does not include his additions and that his deviations are not from the religion? What is the jarh and ta'deel, criticism and appraisal? And is it a means towards the destruction of the ummah or its rectification? Criticism and praise has always been the way that Allah Ta'ala preserved this message from the very first years. That when the people of bid'ah began to spread falsehood about the religion, the people of the sunnah raised their voices and spoke against them, naming them, refuting them, warning against them, even writing books against them. And when a person was even known to make errors, and he's a person of the sunnah, but he makes errors in his narrations of hadith, which are the religion. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said such and such, that's your religion. So when a man would be erroneous because he's getting old, or because he's, maybe he's had a calamity in his life and it's affected his memory, then they would begin to say about this man that he's da'if. He's weak, meaning his memory now is no longer reliable. His relaying the hadith has become questionable, has become unauthentic, and any hadith that he narrates is da'if, and their names would be put in books of jarh and ta'deel. Their names would be mentioned amongst the scholars of hadith as people who are not acceptable in narrating this religion. That has always been the way of the Muslims. and there is no requirement or recommendation or even permissibility for you to praise the person of harm for this ummah when you have to warn against him. When you have to warn against him, then you cannot say he's a good person and he has lots of virtues and all of these things. This is called at-tawazun or al-muwazanat, which is not permissible when it comes to warning against harm. You must warn against the harm and refrain from mentioning the good of that person. Every person has some good. But what would it be like if I warned you against Iblis himself? And then I mentioned to you, well, he does, when he swears, he takes an oath by the izzah of Allah, so he has some tawheed. How would it be if I warned you against shaitan, Iblis, and told you, but he has virtues? Would you take it seriously when I warn you against him, or would my warning suffer and become weak if I start praising him and saying virtues? So nothing exists except there is some khair in it from some angle. So it is not the case that when you warn against a harmful person that you have to mention something good. And people say, but al-Dhahabi, the Imam, he has a book called Sir A'lam al-Nubala, and when he has to criticize someone, he didn't like to criticize people, but when he did, he would make sure that he mentioned their good deeds. Yes, we say that's a book of Tarajum al-Thiqat. That's a book of praising the Imams and the great scholars. So yes, if you have to mention something negative about a scholar who the ruling is you should praise him and encourage the people to take from him, and you have to mention something historically that happened that has some negativity in it, then you praise him and you laud him and you mention him in a very good way. But the same Dhahabi has al-Mughni fi al-Du'afa. He has Mizan al-I'tidal. Right? The same Dhahabi has other books where his point was not to praise the great scholars, but to criticize those who are not able to convey the religion properly. And he dispraises them, and he doesn't mention their good deeds in them. So in that is a deflation of and a destruction of the principle of muwazanat, that you have to praise people if you need to criticize them. So we say to you, for example, stay away from the tafsir of Nu'man Ali Khan. Stay far away from the deviant tafsir of Nu'man Ali Khan. Stay away from it. And we don't have to say, but he's a good, virtuous brother. Rather we say, stay away from what harms you in your religion. He is a person who slips in deviance here and there and distracts people from the scholars and keeps people from understanding their aqidah. Because the claim here is that Nu'man Ali Khan gives such an exhaustive tafsir. He reads 40 to 50 books before he gives a lecture on a verse that he's going to give tafsir about. Oh, he's so comprehensive in the issues that he mentions in his tafsir. Try to find his tafsir of an attribute of Allah. Try to find his tafsir of an attribute of Allah, and try to find the Salafi aqidah in the attributes of Allah. Subhanallah. Tayyib. You are being warned against an individual that will harm you in your religion. An individual that will teach you to read the Quran backwards and look for tafsir in reading the verses from left to right. Reading the Arabic verses backwards with his palindromes, where he seeks out the tafsir of verses when you read them backwards. He will teach you a manhaj in extracting tafsir from the book of Allah that will lead you to the hellfire. The scholars of old, they used to identify when a person reads the Quran backwards that is from the disobedience and the trickery of the magicians. That they would write verses of Allah backwards. We have no interest, because our Salaf had no interest in reading a verse backwards, meaning the letters backwards. And anyone who tries to teach you a methodology in tafsir that includes counting the numbers of times something is mentioned and adding up these numbers in a mathematical tafsir, or the tafsir of reading a verse with the letters backwards and coming to some conclusion, these are people of batiniya manhaj, people who seek to try to make tafsir of the book that with meanings that are not evident in the clear Arabic phrases, yet through reading them backwards you may come to a conclusion. Or through adding up the numbers of the times the word day and night are mentioned and comparing day and night, you'll come to some conclusion in tafsir. This is deviance. and this is not the way of the scholars of tafsir. So we warn you against that individual, and we don't mention any good deeds, because the point here is to get you to reach safety in your religion and to stay away from that harm. Not for you to say, oh, I heard some virtues that were mentioned, and perhaps you never heard of him and you like those virtues that were mentioned, and now you want to go listen to that harmful person. So stay away from that individual. May Allah Ta'ala guide him. There are a number of things that people would say about those who would criticize or advise and warn the Muslims against harm and mention the names of the people, and it would be a very long Q&A if we allowed ourselves to go into all of those doubts. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. With that, we'll close for the evening, sending salat and salam on the Messenger of Allah and upon his family and followers.